lie. It's not true at all. And the same way from there, when you say mainland India, it makes it seem that everything's okay everywhere. You know, it's in terms of, this is a huge argument I've had many times. I have a lot of cousins in Shillong, so you know,
what I wanted to ask you, I mean, to build on something that you're talking about, and this is not part of the political discourse. Human rights activists, when they come on TV, they don't talk about it. What I found, at least, I mean, in certain areas, Nagaland, Meghalaya, having traveled there, spoken to people, that insurgency has created a creamy layer. And this creamy layer, which earlier, when the insurgency started off, they didn't have political power, they didn't have economic power, but today they have political power and they have economic power. But they're benefiting from status quo, they're benefiting from the funds coming in. 80% of the state budgets come from the center. If you go through the state budgets, even Manipur state budget, about 70 to 75% is earmarked for development. And there is absolutely nothing on ground. I mean, there are no roads, you mentioned no electricity, there's no infrastructure once you go outside Imphal. Yes, I completely agree with you, AFSPA is important. It is important to talk about discrimination, but at a local level, is it also not important to hold your politicians accountable to talk about local development and local issues as well?
People talk about it, social network side, or over a cup of tea in private conversations, even public statements, and the present regime is pretty unpopular. No developmental issues becomes issues in elections. AFSPA couldn't become election issues. There's something missing in that. I've been thinking about it. So in that sense, only a savior or an external, as in trying to take you out, seems to be a sort of a longing of a helpless people, or if I may say sometimes helpless, or otherwise unwilling to take the required risk. Otherwise change has to come from within.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't make villain out of politicians for me.
Yeah.
There are other significant segments of the society. Just as you say, why blame Indian state all the time or central leadership? What happened to your group? Similarly, why blame the political class all the time? Why is that our society not able to make these issues a part of their conduct? That you don't give me electricity, it doesn't make sense to talk about development without this status. I don't want, how you're putting up CCTV without, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If the government is not doing it, how is that we cannot change the regime? You said this is practical. What is the practical? If people are doing actions and analysis, and there's something missing here.
Yeah.
So I think you are absolutely right at that level. There is something, I don't have a full answer to. I've been thinking about it a lot. But one thing is very clear. If I point a finger to the politicians, I know that fingers are pointing at my tribe called the academics.
Right now, Manipur's problem is Manipur's problem, Nagaland's problem is Nagaland's problem. The rest of the country doesn't really care. Is, at some level, I feel, I might be wrong. I mean, apart from the lack of awareness, the lack of, education, a huge part of the problem is the lack of trade between the northeast region and the rest of the country. If I, sitting in Punjab, had a financial stake in Nagaland, I would care about Nagaland. Do you think that's something that we need to build on, and that will take us forward?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah?
That should increase, yeah.
And so do you agree?
No, that's true. I think you said, this insurgency has become something, you said, status quo, some people are getting
people are gaining from status quo.
I think you were absolutely bang on target with that. People have said this, but remember that there's too much of a nuance that we have been insisting on. People say journalism, and journalists should be careful about this. Insurgency had arisen before, now it has become status quo. Both ways, people remember that when it started, government of India responded as a hostile, and they keep on denying that this is a political issue.
Yeah.
Now you get an alibi because of this new development, it's extortions, and people are getting benefit out of it. So both ways, you're getting the benefit of it. But the fact remains, yes, there is a logic. A movement might have begun by an X factor, but the movement produces its own rationale in course of it. Similarly, all movements, nationalist movement in India might be driven by certain kind of thing, but now we discovered that there were personal implications, interests, as Partha Chatterjee called it, skeletons now coming out of this cupboard.
Yeah.
Our heroes become questionable heroes at one level. So movement has that character, and I think you are right. Insurgency and conflict has become a massive business, both intellectual, political, as well as economic business.
Before Avalok sort of wraps up with his last question, I want to ask from both of you. I mean, throughout the conversation, the concept of idea of India has been coming up time and again, and we've been debating whether what India was, 65 years before 65 years and 100 years back and blah blah. But from both of you, to Achi, to begin, you ideally in your mind, what is the idea of India? What is the India that you want to belong to?
Actually, in one way, I am very proud to be Indian because I'm working on Arab women and comparing, women in India and their democracy and authoritarian regimes. We are very lucky to be in India. That's one way. But, as we have talked about Northeast, the differences between Northeast and main India, mainstreams, I think democracy, the true meaning of democracy is still missing somehow, somewhere. Because if it is true democracy, there won't be any discrimination.
Whether on the basis of gender or even
Yeah,
ethnicity
yeah,
or
it
the
should
state
be
that you
better.
belong to.
Yeah,
So democracy seems to be the key factor,
yeah.
should be in the largest democracy of the world. Professor, what is
It
your
is,
idea?
it is.
What is your
I
idea of
think
India?
that's this is democracy is a very seductive expression. I said it is. You can invoke this terminology from the affairs, from the bedroom to the boardroom. And the relationship can cover through this. And equally, it is why this term has become so widely abused at one level. Anything you want to discredit others, you call it undemocratic. But I am a hardcore liberal. I sense that because I value freedom, I value human reasoning, I value human dignity. At the end of the day, that's what. If any India has a collective form, if we have to aspire for, I think this would be this liberal core at the end of the day. So for me, India in that sense for me is that India that I am engaging with an activity of unfolding, of deconstructing, so that this oppressive structures, this falsehood, this lit is off, so that we can see what are the other alternatives that opens up in front of us. That's how I see the idea of India.
And my final question to you, Sad, sticking to this approach of looking ahead and what India has in store, what is the way forward for tackling discrimination, bringing the Northeast into the mainstream, so to say? How do we do it?
I think there's no big agenda. There are small things. I teach, it's exciting. Last 17, 18 years of my career as a professional academics, shaping young people's mind from different parts of the country as well as outside the country, shaping their minds, their value system as individuals, the way they look at it, how they engage with it. This is one way of going forward. In other words, small things that we do. You do your job as a journalist. When something has happened, don't take this latest example. Don't take it as no distant or relative complaining. And that's why I think the way forward is to small thing, to engage with it, and also fight the hegemonic oppressive propaganda. If you see that there is no armed rebellion and then the army is an instrument of law and order, it's temporary, 50, 60 years is temporary, all this falsehood, one must be able to deal with it. Call a spade for what it is, a spade.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking out the time to join us. It's been
my pleasure.
a lot of fun talking to both of you, and I couldn't agree more. Small steps is what we need to do, and I vote the first small step we take is stop referring to the Northeast as the Northeast and the rest of India as mainland India, because that starts the divide. Thank you so much.